Okay. Can I make fun of the Patriots free agency for a little bit? No, I'm kidding. I won't make the audience sit through NFL stuff anymore.
I mean, that's okay as long as we can talk about how the Eagles rebuild is now.
So what?
I just your deep sigh.
We're doing fine. We're okay. I'm not worried about it. The core is intact, and that's all that matters. Howie Roseman will figure it out. It's not like last time that we made the Super Bowl. The next year was a bit of a nightmare, and we lost CJ Gardner-Johnson, and no, I'm actually fine with the Eagles offseason. I expected all of this except for the CJ Gardner-Johnson trade, which happened today. So I'm really like, it's not even affected by it basically, because I just told myself like they're going to lose 3 or 4 guys that were somewhat important to the team. And then they're going to get comp picks for it. So we're not going to do NFL talk anymore because people are over it. We're in March now. I mean, I'm learning who new NFL players are every day during this, including several players that signed huge contract deals, and I had never even heard of them before. That's my favorite part of NFL free agency. It's like some guard that played for like the Jacksonville Jaguars gets like $70 million, and I'm like, I didn't know this human existed. Good for him.
Yeah, good for him.
There are simply too many NFL players.
Yeah. Making 9 times what Alexander Ovechkin makes.
But also still being able to be called broke by many players that we're about to talk about on today's podcast.
Such as Torrey Craig.
I was going to say, when who was it that signed like a massive deal the other day? I think it was DK Metcalf, and people were like, that's not even Brandon Ingram money.
Yeah.
Like that's not even I'm trying to think of someone who makes in the 30 million. Emmanuel Quickley's calling you broke.
Yeah. You have multiple pretty much the entire Raptors roster is calling you broke, which is fucked up.
Congrats to Josh Allen on getting the Bradley Beal level contract.
Dak Prescott has like the most onerous contract of like all time, and he's making Draymond Green money? Like,
yeah, exactly. Peyton Manning's career earnings are like the same as Tobias Harris's.
It's awesome. Shout out to the NBA, man.
Yeah, that's great. So, all right. A completely unique and original idea that was founded on the You Know Ball podcast and not done on any other podcast before this podcast. The worst contracts draft. That's what we're about to do today. An annual favorite that we invented. We have trademarked. We've copyrighted. Any other podcast that is doing this format, the worst contracts draft during this time period, they should be expecting to see us in the court of law.
Cease and desist letters will be drawn up.
Yes. But first, Pearl Jam. No. So we're going to go through, you know what the deal is.
Big Waz, I want you to take a pick.
Yeah. Sam said he relates to Big Waz in a big way because he's also an NBA podcaster that doesn't watch the NBA.
And I just want to point out, I do a better job than Big Waz, and he gets paid for it. Because I would actually watch the NBA if it was my job more often than I do.
That's fair.
I would watch more than 3 games a week if I wasn't.
This is the advertisement for everyone to sign up for the Patreon. And
sign up for the Patreon.
Like this video on YouTube so that we can reach more people and Sam can quit his job and we can.
If you're annoyed by me being wrong all the time, you have to sign up for the Patreon in order to get me to do that.
If you want Sam to be right more,
yeah. If you enjoy me being wrong, sign up for the Patreon and I'll make sure to be even dumber with the time on my hands. I'll watch the games, but just come up with new opinions that are beyond the pale. Like, is Jakob Poeltl the 45th best player in the NBA? Maybe I'll defend that.
Or we will give him more free time so he can grind old NBA games from the early 2000s so he can come up with a compilation of why Shaq is overrated.
For those of you unaware, I've been arguing this in the Discord, and then I took it to DMs with Trill. We were arguing about whether or not you were arguing Giannis versus KG, and then I just entered the ring to say, and Shaq's overrated too.
Just out of nowhere, Sam just throws up. By the way, I just want you to be reminded that Shaq is overrated.
I just want to point out, Pacers, Chris Mullin's Pacers, the 5'9" led Philadelphia 76ers, Jason Kidd Nets. That is not exactly a gauntlet. All those Lakers titles are fake. Anyway, continue.
Yeah, definitely. Sam comes in to say, look, me and Shaq might agree on everything that he's ever done outside of basketball, but on the court, we agree that he is an overrated player. Sam is in lockstep with Shaq on every opinion he's ever said in the public space.
Can I ask you something? Why were Pistons fans getting mad about that? Because didn't he just say that they weren't going to win the title, which I think is true.
No. He said they were 4 games below 500, which is not true at all.
Oh, yeah.
He was just objectively wrong. And they were like, you didn't even get the record right. Like I think people go way too far with the Shaq and Chuck. And like, once again, I do think Chuck watches the games. I don't think Shaq watches the games. I think it's pretty obvious. But I also have accepted that they are just for entertainment value purpose. They don't really like Chuck's an okay surface level analyst. Like, I don't think he's a particularly bad analyst. I mean, he has personal grudges like the one he has against JJ Redick right now that he's holding against him.
Yeah.
But
jump shooting teams. He doesn't like jump shooting teams.
At the end of the day, they are for entertainment and they bring good entertainment value. And if you're still getting mad at a Shaq opinion in 2025, it's time to look in the mirror, because Shaq has just been continuously proven wrong about things for so long that how can you even let it affect you? Like, I understand getting mad at a Kendrick Perkins opinion more than a Shaq opinion, because at least Perkins occasionally watches the games. It feels like Shaq has been checked out for like at least 10 years.
Yeah. They're there for entertainment purposes, which is fine. Yeah. It's good.
It's I mean, now could we have more balanced across the spectrum better coverage? Sure. But I don't really think that they're single-handedly ruining the NBA product, is all I'll say.
I think what people are mad about is that there are a lot of people who cover the NBA the right way, who work very hard at it, and do, watch every game, put a lot of time and effort into this, and, get a grand total of like $10,000 a year in like part-time jobs, whereas like these guys are commanding millions of dollars. And it's like, well, that's not fair. And it's like, well, yes, it is not fair, but it's also like, I'm sorry, there's a little bit of the market being dictated here where, like, I'm sorry, not that many people want to hear about how De'Aaron Fox is really good out of Spain. This year, or the sliding doors that JJ Redick like drew up. Like, a lot of people don't really want things that granular. It's only like the sickos and the people who subscribe to podcasts like this.
So I do just want to point out that people will always say the NFL does a really good job of it, and I don't disagree. I do think the NFL does a good job of making sure that people understand the game a little bit better, breaking down coverages, plays, whatever. But the large majority of where that is effective is in the game.
Yeah.
When you're watching the game. Like, no one is sitting down and watching Dan Orlovsky and Mina Kimes on NFL Live. Like, they're just not. I think they do a decent job. I'm just saying, I think that comparing what they do to what, Greg Olsen is doing on the Fox broadcast is two different things. I think having like guys like Legs being like calling games, being color commentators is good for the game. I think we should have more of that. But I also don't think that Chuck and Shaq fucking around at halftime and Stephen A. Smith and Kendrick Perkins screaming, nonsensical takes in the middle of games is really the reason that the ratings are down or whatever. But by the way, the ratings are back up. Adam Silver rigged the NBA. He got Luka to the Lakers, and now we're doing well.
Yep, we're back.
Yep,
we're back. All you had to do was strangle Dallas basketball in its crib.
Yeah. A totally worthy sacrifice for the ratings monster. Thank you, Adam Silver, for helping a Saturday Lakers Celtics game get 5 million people watching or whatever happened. All right, let's get into the contract draft. We did enough fucking dilly-dally in here.
Okay.
Okay, so do you want to take the first pick in this?
Sure, Bradley Beal.
All right. Make your case on Bradley Beal. Stop typing and make your case on Bradley Beal. Because Waz also picked this during their best contracts or worst contracts draft as the first pick, and Bill and House had a little bit of pushback.
They did? I didn't listen to the episode, so that's insane. Was that recent? Did they do that recently?
It was a week ago.
The most recent one? A week ago? Okay. Yeah. That's insane to push back on this because, okay, number one, he's a supermax player who's not good. So that's like strike number one on that. So automatically that like is a criteria all on itself because there's guys like Joel Embiid who are like injured and like might not be good again. But when Joel Embiid can actually play, he's still good. Like even when Joel Embiid is bad, he is an above average starter. like that is Bradley Beal is just a starter. Like when he has a good game, also gets injured all the time, has a supermax contract, and most imperatively has a no trade clause.
Yeah.
Which is the thing that really fucking like sets this over the top. So he has no trade value. You would have to pay much to get off of his thing. And it has to be a trade that he would then have to have total control over. I don't think it's like even a competition that he's the worst contract in the NBA. So that is my that's my thing. I know that his is maybe shorter than some of the other contracts like in the NBA, and maybe that's like the hill you plant your flag on. But like the other thing is like we're doing this right now. A contract being 5 years, it has to be something that is like inordinately bad, like the Tobias Harris contract was when it was signed, for something to be that bad that far out. Because typically the cap rises. Yeah. These contracts are not as onerous like further on down the line. So when we're talking about supermax contracts, and in particular, like kind of how they impact the game, I really don't think Bradley Beal having like 2 less years makes it like any less painful. Because some of these other ones, like other teams are just going to be able to like get out of them. And then I know we're not really counting team context, but then on top of it, to be at the most be a part of the most asset poor franchise and front office in the Phoenix Suns, to be their problem is like even worse. Like maybe that even makes it maybe I'm over indexing because I have to take that into consideration myself. But yeah.
I mean, look, they even kind of ended up agreeing at the end that it is probably the worst contract. The no trade clause is the thing that makes it so unique that we've never seen before, because no trade clause are usually reserved for like the greatest players of all time. Like LeBron has a no trade clause. Okay, LeBron is LeBron. Bradley Beal, when he signed the contract, it was bad. Everyone knew it was bad. We made jokes about it being bad. He signed it literally the same day that Jokic signed his contract extension, fresh off of his second MVP. So that is, I remember making fun of that at the time. It has only aged worse as Bradley Beal has gotten older, and he's also gotten a little bit worse. And now he's on another team that can't trade him. So we have seen that. The only thing that I would ask is, and I hate to do this because obviously the person I'm going to take second is Joel Embiid. The only thing I will say is that, does Joel Embiid's contract, now once again, you are correct that Joel had a stretch this year where he looked good, and he had, a little, you could see a little bit of normal Joel Embiid in there. And normal Joel Embiid, even if he isn't an MVP level player, is an all-star, all-NBA level player. And he had a handful of games in like December where he looked great. Now, I don't know how much we're going to see that this often this year. Or I'm sorry, just in the future. We're obviously not going to see it for the rest of this year. But my question, I guess, is like, what is the difference between... Does anyone touch the Joel Embiid contract right now if the Sixers were to put it on the trade market, is my question.
No.
So what's the difference between that and a no trade clause?
The difference between that and the no trade clause is that Bradley Beal is going to be able to play basketball and will not be ruled ineligible by medical doctors to the point where you can have part of the contract annulled and that cap space freed up.
Okay.
And
that's also that whole retirement clause thing. I feel like it's going to get conflated by a lot of people over the next few years, in that people will see it as a way to get off the Joel Embiid contract and not have to pay him the money. The thing is, you would have to have an owner who's willing to pay the money, and because the contract's still guaranteed. You still have to pay that contract. It's essentially just an amnesty clause to get the money off of the books. So my question is, what owner is willing to take the risk to pay $65 to $70 million in the last year of Joel Embiid's contract, which is still 4 or 5 years away, and say, okay, we're willing to do that, and we're also willing to spend enough to keep the team good?
Well, I think it depends on the deal, because I feel like I would be really surprised if Joel Embiid's contract didn't have some sort of Lonzo Ball style like insurance on it in some way, where there is like some sort of scam aspect to it, where you can be, for example, the Chicago Bulls and be like, look, we traded for Joel Embiid. And then like, meanwhile, you're getting like paid out by fucking United Healthcare with like the Brian Johnson Memorial funding funds here to like undo whatever the hell is like going on there. So I don't know. I just think that my point here with that stuff is I think there is a floor on the worst case for Joel Embiid, where, because I agree with you, I don't think it's like likely that he like has to medically retire or anything like that, but it does save you the worst case scenario of this guy literally cannot play and you just have a nothing contract of like $60 million for 5 years. That's not possible either. What's most likely and is most likely going to happen is Joel Embiid plays 30 to 40 games from here on out, but you get 30 to 40 games a year. You basically get expensive Rob Williams, like, is part of that. And like, I don't know, if you catch the right thing, that could be really valuable if he's like, for example, healthy in the playoffs. That's like a huge if, but we're talking about load management and a different thing of his career. I still do not believe that the best ability is availability. I do think that there is some value in still having a high level performer that is in there somewhere. And I think that if Joel Embiid can play and he doesn't have to medically retire, he's going to be a good player. Like when he plays, it's just not going to be very often. So,
yeah, I mean, I just kind of look at I don't think there's a single team in the NBA that would touch the Joel Embiid contract, which makes the difference between Bradley Beal having a no trade clause and Joel Embiid not having a no trade clause kind of moot. Because there are 4 or 5 teams that might be willing to take on the Bradley Beal contract in some context. Now, the odds of all of that lining up where you're all parties agree in the Bradley Beal situation is very unlikely. We just saw it this past deadline, as they discussed on that episode. It seems unlikely that they're going to be able to move that until at least maybe it's an expiring contract, which is still a year and a half away. And on top of that, Bradley Beal still gets to dictate and determine where he goes. So they're both bad in different ways. Like, the Joel thing is bad because it almost forces, if he is not able to be readily available and close to the player that he was before, it almost forces the Sixers to go into a rebuild, which inherently kind of gives it no real trade value or any value on the contract for the team that he's on. So I kind of look at the both of those contracts as uniquely terrible in the way. I mean, it's a real bummer. It's the first time I feel like we've taken one of these injury contracts up top at these drafts. We're normally taking the like insanely overpaid deals, the ones that you've referenced, like the Tobias Harris contract, or in the past it's been like Jordan Poole or whoever. Those are normally the guys that we're taking. And then we're taking, I think we've taken Lonzo Ball in the past during this draft. When he was on a bigger contract, he wasn't able to play. But we usually save that for a little bit just because it's depressing what's happening with Joel right now. It's not something that is funny or fun for me to discuss at all. We've talked about it plenty on here. So I think it's pretty obvious that those two were kind of in a tier of their own in terms of how terrible they are. So with the third pick in the worst contracts draft, Sam, who do you select?
Well, first of all, I want to apologize to the comments section who have said that I'm pandering to 76ers fans by defending the Joel Embiid contract at that point. All right, with the third pick, I will select Paul George of the Philadelphia 76ers as the third worst contract in the NBA.
Yeah, it always feels good when you're creating a graphic for an episode and two of the three players on the graphic are from your favorite team when you're doing the worst contracts in the NBA.
That's good. I always think that's good. This is like, but the Joel thing, like you said, the Joel thing is like sad. And like, there's a lot of like variance to the Joel thing, like in terms of like his health and some of these other like things. The Paul George is like a very standard, like bad NBA contract that we have seen time and time again. Like it is like,
it also is kind of funny for a few different reasons.
Mm-hmm.
Well, as a fellow 34, 35-year-old man, it is not funny that that we're seeing a man lose all of his value to the world at age 34, 35, having to give up what he loves the most, which is podcasting with two of his best friends, and focus on his job, quote unquote. That is obviously not a laughing matter at all. But it is very funny that the two funny parts of this are that Daryl Morey's big genius plan was to punt on last season, 2 years after he essentially punted on the season with Ben Simmons and the drama with that before they traded for James Harden. And their big plan was to get Paul George on this contract to make them, a top-heavy team, but a team that could potentially compete for a title. And not only does Joel Embiid's body fall apart in that year and a half that he decides to make the punt, but also they get Paul George here, and it is very obvious that he never wanted to be here in the first place. And essentially gave up at the first sign of adversity. And then on top of all of that, when the team was still like somewhat competitive and trying to hang in games earlier in the season, he was trying, or he wasn't trying quite as hard as when the season is very obviously over. And he has a game like he had, a week and a half ago against the Warriors where he balls out in a completely meaningless game, only hurts the Sixers pick, makes a game-winning shot down the stretch against the Warriors, who are fighting for their own playoff lives, and is really just truly shining when the lights are at their dimmest. We have players like throughout NBA history, Michael Jordan, LeBron, guys that as the stages get higher, they can prove to perform better and better as the stages get higher. Paul George is like literally the complete opposite. I mean, I think that his best game as a Sixer was in the preseason against the Minnesota Timberwolves, a game in Iowa that was virtually impossible for anyone to stream. We literally had to find an illegal stream of the game to be able to watch it because it wasn't on, and it was just an in-arena stream of the game. It wasn't even on television. So that shows you the level that Paul George is playing at in his career now. Truly, just an absolutely miserable season. So he never wanted to be here in the first place. He signs this massive contract. And yeah, I mean, I will say this much. Of the three that we've drafted so far, I think Paul George has probably the most chance to make this contract not look as terrible as it is right now.
Yeah, well, that was what I was going to say, is that like, I think the upside on this contract is I do think like there's a pretty good chance there's a dead cat bounce like next year. Like I do think that like the Sixers might be able to move this if he like starts hot next year or something like that. Teams are going to be able to look at this and be like, oh, he was just off like last year, because like the stats are kind of there for like all the years in advance.
We literally just saw this with Zach LaVine.
Yeah.
Like, now is Zach LaVine younger? Yes, but he
Yes.
also had like a weird year and a half, and then had to bounce back. And once again, they didn't get good value back for him, but they were able to get off the contract in a way that those first two guys, I just don't see a world. Even if Joel Embiid bounces back, I don't think there's a world where you could trade him because everyone's going to be afraid of it reversing and like turning back into what it is this year. It's going to be hard in the future to ever move off of that kind of deal. And Will just commented and said Paul George would have been an MVP in the tape delay era.
He would have been so good, man. He would have been amazing. TV blackouts, in area blackout. Somebody should track that with there's a like market blackout. If he's any good at anything.
I was gonna say when I guarantee you, I'm so glad that he has whatever fake injury he has right now, so he can't possibly fuck this up. Because the thing is that I know that he would be so dedicated to getting that 10 seed that he would accidentally have like 3 really good games against like the Raptors and the Wizards and all of the teams that don't really matter. And it would end up fucking up the Sixers pick. They would still miss the play and get the 11 seed and then make so that they don't even have a chance to keep their own pick. And that would go to OKC, which honestly, is there anyone in the history of basketball that has done more for a singular organization that he never won a title for than Paul George in Oklahoma City? I mean, he got them Shai Gilgeous-Alexander.
Yeah.
He got them Jalen Williams. He got them multiple other first-round picks. He has now possibly handed them. Now, look, it's not all Paul George's fault. I have a hard time getting like actually mad at guys like Paul George and Nick Nurse and even some of the other veterans that signed with us this season because they thought that Joel Embiid was going to be healthy and they thought we were going to be like legit contenders. Now, could they do a better job while Joel Embiid is out? Absolutely, totally. But we're basically looking at a scenario where Paul George's acquisition might be a large part of why OKC gets another top 10 pick.
Well, and to go another step too, he didn't have to resign there. Like that was kind of part of the reason they were able to trade for him is because he was expiring and everyone was like, boy, that's kind of risky of Sam Presti to trade for an expiring guy like that. And for Oklahoma City to sell him on Oklahoma City, and Paul George fucking resigned and then got traded. Like, so it, like, honestly, that is one of the I obviously I despise all the fawning over Sam Presti for things that are very easy to do in rebuilds. That was genuine like balls and good general management work to get Paul George to resign and then flip him like that. That was where everything was earned there. So credit to the evil Sam Presti there. But yeah, I mean, I think Paul George, like the idea, because here's the other thing about Paul George. He's a big wing who hypothetically can shoot threes. And
he could before he put on a Sixers jersey, to be clear.
Yes.
Which is a thing that we've seen many times before where that cryptocurrency patch hits the skin and then they immediately lose all of their shooting ability. This is not the only time this has happened. I laughed at the idea that people thought that could happen, but I should have understood that some curses are greater than I could ever imagine and that the Sixers will never lose a narrative battle.
No,
the Sixers will never win a narrative battle because that was the one thing I overestimated is that for years I said that shooting curse wasn't real because it did not prove to be true with guys like George Niang. It did not true. Like a lot of guys would come here and have their best year shooting for their career, especially when we had James Harden. But now the universe has restored is what I'm trying to say. Okay. Nature is healing. An all-time wing shooter went to the Sixers and immediately lost his ability to make threes, especially threes that matter in any capacity. So in a way, it is really just a full circle, amazing moment for the Sixers and the end of the process. So,
yeah, and I just think Paul George, like not as long as Joel Embiid's 4-year contract, 3 years after this year. Again, like we talked about, I think there's a chance for like a little bit of a dead cat bounce. And, he does fit in hypothetically onto like good teams, which I think was what brings him down here. But my thing is just like watching Paul George this year. I just don't see how this gets better as he gets older. And that's why I keep calling it a dead cat bounds, because I think if he's comes out of the gate next year looking good, I think people are gonna be like, oh, like look, he was fine last year. No, I think that's going to be the fraudulent part if he's like starts out good next year, and I think that's going to be Daryl Morey or whoever's running this team's chance to strike, because I don't think Paul George is going to be good on this contract. So
yeah, and also the world that we're living in is that as we said, they're staring down the barrel of a rebuild anyway. So if you're staring down the barrel of a rebuild, you can't really be like your normal self that Daryl Morey is. That no, if we're trading a star, we have to get back a star. Like you're just not really in that world anymore. Like you need to do what's best for the team and the future of the team, if he's even here making the decisions like you pointed out. Okay, so we've gotten the obvious ones out of the way. Those are the very three obvious worst contracts in the NBA right now, especially because most of those, two of those are basically just starting right now. Yeah. With the fourth pick in the worst contracts draft, I'm going to go with someone who's a little bit more off the radar. I wouldn't call this person a star. I wouldn't call this person, I don't even know if I would call this person a role player. I'm going to go with Jerami Grant.
I like it. I didn't, I don't even think I had him on my list, but you're right. I just didn't think of him.
So when this contract was signed, it probably should have been a warning sign that it was literally the exact contract that Tobias Harris signed. 5 years, 180 million, like down to the years, down to the amount that he's getting per year.
But very cursed number. The 5 year, watch out for those 5 year 180 contracts.
But when he signed the contract, I was like, okay, if I remember correctly, I think Dame was still on the Trailblazers. He was kind of like 1 foot out the door, but we were like, all right, if they're still trying to stay competitive, Jerami Grant's a good enough player. Now, look, is he a big wing who can't rebound and is overrated defensively? Yes. But also he had grown as a shooter. He was a little bit more effective in a role as a shooter scorer type. And that always has value. But we're now going on, I believe now he's been in and out of the lineup all year for them. He's not someone that is like necessarily like heavily relied upon. But if he doesn't play in April this year, which, I mean, he's playing right now. Like I said, he's been in and out of the lineup. But if he doesn't play in April this year, I think this would be the 5th straight year that he has not played games in April, which is, once again, this is Jerami Grant's kind of living the dream is what I'm trying to say. Like, everyone always criticized him for leaving the Nuggets when they were, on the verge of becoming contenders, and they made the conference finals in the bubble, and he took a big bag with the Pistons so he could get buckets. That decision has made him well over $200 million while never being a top 40 or 50 player in the NBA. It has let him take off every April through September. So basically he doesn't have to work for half of the year because none of the teams he's ever on are a threat to make the playoffs. And he shuts down early every year. Now, on top of what I said before, the fact that he is someone who never plays games in April, he is someone who he's played 47 games this year, 54 last year, 63 the year before that, 47 the year before that, 54 the year before that. So we're going on years and years of him just not always being available, and he's having by far the worst year of his career statistically. He's shooting 37% from the field, 36% from three. His averages are down from 21 a game last year to 14 a game this year. As I said before, like, he's not a really good passer. He's a horrible rebounder for a wing with his skill set. And defensively, he just hasn't quite been the same. I mean, I just think that if you're looking at the guys who make north of $30 million per year, which, like I said, when he signed this contract, it was 5 years, $180 million. For him to make that over the course of the last 2 years, and now he's still in the middle of this contract. He has 1, 2, 3 years after this. So last year was actually the first year of this contract, which I thought it was in the third year. I always forget that. So he makes $29 million this year, 32 the next year, 34 the year after that. Then he has a player option at age 33.
for
$36 million in 27-28.
Yeah, I think he's going to be picking that one up.
That's what seems so wild to me, is the fact that he was already a little bit sneaky old because he was kind of irrelevant the first few years of his career on those Sixers teams, and then became kind of a hot commodity around the time that he got to play with the Nuggets. And yeah, he is basically not been a top 100 player in the NBA this year and is making north of $30 million. So when we talk about bad contracts, this is what I think of in terms of like a team giving out a bad contract to a player who probably wasn't worth it at the time, and it's only gotten worse since he signed it. And not really like due to anything other than the fact that like he's just not really that guy. It's like, has he aged and had some injury issues? Yes. But it's also more of the fact that like you gave out a massive contract to a player who was never anything more than like a fourth or fifth starter on a team.
And he also plays the 4, which is just like the least valuable position in the NBA. Like I feel like is 4s. Like, like
I don't even know. I don't even know. Like, can you call him a 4? He doesn't rebound.
Yeah.
Like, if you're a 4 who averages 3 rebounds a game, like that's what's so insane to me, is like defensively, maybe he takes some of those assignments, but
do you want to guess where he is in VORP in the NBA? What place he is in the NBA in VORP?
230th.
You're a little high. It's 260. Yeah. Also a negative BPM, which is pretty swag.
Yeah. I mean, he's never been like a huge analytics guy. Analytics have always said that he's a little bit overrated. Every analytic has always said Jerami Grant is overrated because he doesn't rebound, and they largely think that his defense isn't quite as good as when people were saying that he was like this lockdown defender. So he doesn't get stocks really all that much for a guy with his skill set. And on offense, like it's just kind of weird for guys like him, because he's not a guy that's going to fit on a lot of great teams because he's not a really good passer. He had years where he was a really good shooter and like as a play finisher type, sure, but he also wanted to cook. And like if you have that skill set, it's kind of hard to fit on good teams, and then if you're on bad teams, you're not helping the young players develop. Like, I think a lot of the reason why these guys on Portland have probably taken a little bit of a step this year is because they've gotten guys like Toumani Camara and Denny Avdia who just make a little bit more sense around young developing players.
Yeah. And yeah, so I always kind of thought that like this contract would be movable at some point. Like I thought he would kind of like play himself into like somewhere where like when I thought a team like the Bucks would do like a like instead of the Kyle Kuzma move, they would take a role on like Jerami Grant, or like the Suns would take on Jerami Grant, like, and maybe they still do, is like part of the 3-way deal for Kevin Durant or something like that. You know what I'm saying? So something like that is happening, but those spots are kind of starting to dry up now. Like he was linked to the Lakers quite a bit back before they got Luka, and I think that's like out the window now. Like,
well, they got a little bit greedy with this too, because Cronin at the time, the reporting was the Lakers were willing to give up, I think it was Rui Hachimura and whatever salary it took plus a first round pick. And sorry, I just had someone screaming outside my window, distracted me. But the Lakers were only willing to give up that one first round pick, and the Blazers demanded 2. Now, if you could go back on that a year ago, is that a butterfly effect moment too? I know. Well, I guess the Lakers still would have had enough to trade for Luka.
Yeah, they would have. Yeah, because they didn't really need that, to be honest.
Because they had another
Dalton Connect is not.
I was going to say they still had an extra first round pick. And then they traded AD and Max Christie as the core. That I think that would have been something like Rui Hashimura and Jared Vanderbilt in the first round pick or something along those lines. But I'm sure that they wish that they could go back on that and make that style deal now, as opposed to waiting for 2 first round picks for Jerami Grant, which you're never going to get now. And now it's just you're just going to have to ride the rest of this contract out, basically.
I have something very important to bring up.
Okay.
Chris Haynes just tweeted, Jaylen Williams ruled out against the Boston Celtics.
Yeah, he got hurt last night during the game.
No, I think he's ducking me.
Yeah, he's ducking.
He's not ducking the Boston Celtics. He's ducking me specifically.
He said, I can't take the slander from Sam on the You Know Ball podcast, which gets at a maximum 4,000 listeners on an episode.
That's correct. And he's also doing this to make it so the Thunder win the game.
Yeah. I've seen Shea's stats when J-Dub is on the bench. So when they win this game, now it's really a no-win proposition for me.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
Because if they win, then you can just say, well, it's because J-Dub was out.
Yeah. No, and trust me, I will. Absolutely will.
Unbelievable. But yeah, so I'm gonna take Jerami Grant. I don't really think there are many contracts in the NBA that you can argue that are worse than this one.
Did I tell you? Shout out to Ox Portello, by the way. Ock was saying that both Jaylen Williams are like the court jesters of Shea, like that they just react to him. Now I can't help but think of them as Rosencrantz and Guildenstern.
Just the Zoomer versions.
The Zoomer Hamlet.
They're on the opposite vibe where they're just always positive.
Yes, exactly. Yes. Yeah. It's amazing. Okay, that's a good one. Jerami Grant, good call. I'll go a little more obvious to listeners of this podcast. There's a couple of different directions I'm going to go in. Let's crack the seal on the Toronto Raptors.
I knew you were going to do this.
Let's talk about 6'3" Emmanuel Quickley.
You're height checking him?
Yeah. And his contract, which I'm going to read it off. So this year, $32.5 million. Next year, $32.5 million. The year after that, $32.5 million. We're talking about 5 years of $32.5 million for a guy who is like, I don't think I've ever seen be an above average starter in the NBA. At least Jerami Grant like genuinely did almost make an all-star team like at one point in time. Like I've never seen Emmanuel Quickley. He got like beat out by like the fakest Malcolm Brogdon 6-man man of the year campaign of all time. And this is, I don't know. Like, I just don't think this is a guy who is maximized as a 6-man, is now being paid the third best player on a championship team money. He's making $12 million more than Derek White. Like if you average out he and Derek White's like money over like the next few years, it's like about even, which is just absurd. And he's just like not a good player. Like, I mean, he's a fine player. He's not a good player though. And he's just not a starter. And it's just one of the most baffling contracts of like all time that I can remember, because like they had his restricted free agency rights and I guarantee you nobody was giving him that money.
That is now look, sometimes I think when we miss the forest for the trees a little bit, when people, Bill loves to do this. A lot of people in the media love to do, who are they bidding against? But these last two contracts were kind of the definition of who they were bidding against. And I will say, I think that rewarding a guy who has been like a core member of your organization for years, and you drafted him and you want to like build him up and develop him, I think that's fine, even if it's a little bit of an overpay sometimes, and you're just betting on like them getting better and them growing with the organization and stuff. They traded for Emmanuel Quickley like 6 months before this, when the New York Knicks very obviously did not want to give him that money.
Yeah.
And I think, like you said, at worst case scenario, you could let him go out there, get another offer, and then match that offer. And this happens in every sport all the time, where it's like, go test the market, see what your value is, and then we'll match whatever people put up for you. But we're not gonna spend $32 million per year is how much
32 and a half. Yeah.
32 and a half for a guy who had not proven it as a starter for anything more than a few weeks with you. Like, I mean, he got injured at the end of last year after they traded for him, if I remember correctly.
Yep.
And we've talked about this. He hasn't had the best health luck, but that's not a positive. Like, that's not like a good thing if you're talking about like bad contracts. That's also part of it. And then on top of that, like this March that is happening right now, like, you know that he's going to ball out during this March. We talked about it on the Mickey Mouse March podcast that we did last week. He is one of these guys that just tends to ball out down the stretch when no one really gives a fuck. And if he does that during this really, really easy part of the schedule for the Raptors, they literally put him on rest tonight. He's not playing against the Sixers because it was obvious that he was about to drop 40 on us like he did the other night in a win that they had. And that ends up, I think, fucking them long-term, because we've talked about the fact that they need to get real blue chip prospects in the door to kind of fix a little bit of the issues that they have with this roster.
Trill, don't look at the comments for a second because we'll put it in there. What do you think Quickley's true shooting percentages in the playoffs? He's played 255 minutes.
Oh, I know it's really bad. I'm going to guess like 42.
Yeah,
45.
it's 45.
Yeah.
45. Yeah. Which is, by the way, for like most people, like a normal true shooting is like 55%.
Yeah, I mean, for a guard whose best skill set is supposed to be getting buckets, that's not ideal. Now, the thing that I liked about Quickley previously is that I thought he was a little bit more than that in terms of, like, I thought his help defense was pretty good. I thought that his passing was a little bit underrated. I thought that he worked off the ball a decent amount. So he wasn't like your stereotypical microwave scoring guard off the bench. The problem is that he doesn't really have like the elite level traits that like star guards have, and you're paying him like, I wouldn't even say this is like superstar money or like all-star money. This is probably just below that to be like you said, at best, like an average fringe starter type. Like, I just don't really think that I think of all the contracts that we've talked about, you could even make an argument that Bradley Beal deserved his contract more.
Yeah.
Because Bradley Beal made 3 All-Star teams. Now, we all thought it was insane they gave him this contract at the time.
Yeah.
At the time, we were like, giving a Supermax to Bradley Beal is a death sentence. But if you're talking about, like, this is essentially I just compared the Jerami Grant contract to this, and I compare everything to this, but like, this is essentially about as puzzling of a contract as the Tobias Harris contract was at the time.
Yeah. They're honestly like kind of similar, except Tobias Harris was like a starter for the Clippers, at least.
Yeah. Also struggled in the playoffs for the Sixers when he had the chance. Yeah. Also got traded for the season before. And also, who is outbidding you is the question. The main difference is that he was an unrestricted free agent. So if he got disrespected, he could take less money with another team just to spite you. But in the Raptors situation, they didn't even have that wrinkle. The one thing that Muhammad, who's a huge Raptors fan, that he gets pissed about that OG trade. In retrospect, he's like, you know, he's like, I don't hate the idea of trying to go get good young players instead of getting draft picks, but you got a good young player who already re-upped in RJ Barrett, and then you got another one that was expiring in OG Anunoby, and you didn't get someone like Quentin Grimes, who was still in his rookie deal, that could have proven it over the course of a year or two for you before you paid him.
Yeah.
So, like, they could have extracted more value out of that trade.
Or Miles McBride. Like, why are you not asking for Deuce McBride? Is the other one you could have asked for.
Yeah, like, it's obvious that in retrospect, they could have extracted more value just because you could say, look, we know you want to get off the RJ Barrett contract, and we have to pay Emmanuel Quickley immediately. Yeah. So I think that it's obvious that they would probably do things a little bit differently in hindsight.
Yeah. It didn't make sense at the time, though. Like, it was crazy. And this is what, like, you have to know you have to have a plan if you're trading for a guy who's on an expiring contract. Like, you have to. And Masai just did it again with Brandon Ingram. But Anyway.
Yeah, like he should have gotten like I remember when they made the trade, I was like, oh, he'll re-sign for like $20 or $25 million this offseason, and that's fine.
Yeah.
And then he got 32 a year, and it was like, ooh, that's tough.
Yeah.
All right. So do we want to make people mad?
That's the reason the podcast
I was going to say the goal of this podcast. All right. You know what? I'm not going to take the one that I think will make the most people mad. I'll see if we can leave that up to Sam, because Sam loves to do that.
I do.
But I'll take one that's a little bit surprising to people, I think. And I'm going to take Lauri Markkanen.
That was my next one. That's who I thought you meant with the making people mad.
I don't think that Lauri Markkanen has enough people outside of Finland, maybe, that would be too mad about us taking him here. I mean, think about it. Like, he plays for the Utah Jazz. They don't have a ton of fans that are at least active in our comment section. Maybe we'll get some people that are mad at us after this. But the process of this was just terrible. We said it for a year. What are they doing? Lauri Markkanen has one of the greatest value contracts in the NBA. He has crazy high trade value. We just saw what Mikal Bridges got traded for on a value contract. You could sell high. You could get a haul. You could really do this rebuild right in a way that they had kind of fucked up to that point. Like, still to this point, I don't think that they have a prospect that is better than Kyle Filipowski, who they got in the second round of this previous draft. Like, all of their prospects are guys that are, even if they hit, they're so far away from being like true impact players. And most of them I don't think are going to hit. Like, I think we have enough evidence to say that like they're not going to be like stars or starter level players. And if that's the case, then Lauri Markkanen should have been traded last offseason or traded at the last deadline before that, because you signed him to this massive contract and he's a good player, but he requires a certain context in order to be maximized. You need to probably have multiple other creators that are just as good, if not better than him. He needs to be now he has a very unique skill set. He's one of the best 3-point shooters and rebounders combos in the NBA, which is not something that's easy to come by. But defensively, he can be a liability in certain matchups. He's not an offensive engine by any means. He can be part of a great offense, but he isn't a great offense to himself. And they gave him the most amount of money possible and made it so that they can't trade him this year. And if they ever do decide to trade him, it's going to be at half to a third of the value that they would have gotten had they traded him a year ago when he was on that scam contract. And this is just another scenario where I think if they could go back, they would change what they did here. Because now look, maybe all of this changes because they get Cooper Flagg, sure, but how many teams and players can you say that about? Yeah, if your plan is to just get lucky in the lottery and get Cooper Flagg, then sure. Okay, maybe Lauri Markkanen turns out to return his value on this contract. But if that doesn't happen, I highly doubt that will happen on this contract.
My plan, Sharks, I will select Anthony Davis to be on my team for 7 years. I would like to have a 19-year-old Anthony Davis for seasons 19 to 26 on a contract that cannot exceed 25% of the salary cap.
Perfect.
I think it's a flawless plan. Now we just need that to happen. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. All the other stuff too. Yeah, I mean, I think you nailed it. This is, again, we just got done talking about the Raptors. This is another instance of a team shooting themselves in the foot by waiting a little bit, getting a little too cute, waiting a year, falling in love with their own guy like a little bit too much. Like, I think Danny Ainge kind of took it for granted that like Lauri Markkanen, like 2 years before this, was like seen as like a below average starter. Like the Cleveland version of like Lauri Markkanen was like a rehab project.
Yeah.
Like he ended up starting, but like that was like, everyone was like very surprised by how good he was. And then he somehow continued that when he got to the Utah Jazz. And instead of being like, well, this is obviously not going to continue to happen, he was like, he tripled down and said, well, the line goes up linear, boop. Like this needs to be like, I think he's like the 21st highest paid player in the NBA.
Yeah, he makes
like that.
46.3 million this year, 46.1 the following year, 49.8 the year after that, and 53.5 in his final year in 28-29 when he's 31 years old.
Yeah, 23rd. That's tough.
Yeah,
And
let's just be honest. Danny Ainge is wash. He sucks.
he
He's
sucks.
bad at his job.
He and Masai, dude. Like, I don't know what happened to them. They like cratered together. They, two old that really is my goat washed. The two my goats washed of the front office game, because both of them used to be really good GMs and now they both suck. So
it's kind of
laughing at what Will said.
They both have long COVID.
Will said they both have long COVID.
Well, I did hear. I was going to say, well, Masai's in Canada. They handled it pretty well, but he does take vacations in Florida.
That's true. Yeah.
So it's definitely possible that
they were in Tampa. They were in during that time.
There you go. Yeah, I got long COVID. But the Danny Ainge thing, it is funny because it's kind of similar to Paul George, where like there were signs that he was declining his last few years with the Celtics. Danny Ainge, where like he would do shit, and you were just like, "What the fuck are you doing?" Like that doesn't really make any sense. But you're like, GMs go through hot stretches. You know, with Paul George, it was always like, man, he's kind of more of like a role player his last like year and a half, 2 years with the Clippers. Like that shouldn't be a warning sign that like he kind of regularly disappears in these big games. And it very clearly proved to be the case when he got to a new team and he seemingly is athletically more limited and he fell off a cliff. Danny Ainge has now gotten all of this cosign from ownership to just do whatever he wants. And it has kind of backfired. Like, once again, like we've talked kind of ad nauseum about the fact that their rebuild hasn't been going that well, but these are the kind of decisions that end up fucking up your rebuild. Where it's like, yeah, let's give a third of the cap to Lauri Markkanen, who was already like a B tier star and needed the right context to really be maximized. And now you're so far away from getting that even if you're good in 2 years, his contract, the value is going to be gone by that point. Like, he's already almost done that contract, and he has not lived up to it when their context is worse this year as they get younger, as they get less skilled. So they really do need to get some lottery luck these next few years so that he can possibly return some value on this. So, all right. So that's number 6. Who do you have as the 7th worst contract in the NBA right now?
Well, first of all, does it have to be a contract that has been signed already and exists?
I mean, if you want to take Josh Giddey here,
how did you do exactly what I was That's exactly
because I can't believe that everyone is falling for it.
Yeah,
it shocks me. It shocks me to turn on fucking the timeline and go, oh yeah, no, this time it's real that Josh Giddey's doing this in March. This time it's not fake. This time he's different. Like, what how many times does this have to happen before you realize that Josh Giddey is just doing this when no one gives a fuck and the rest of the NBA doesn't care, and then he puts up these fake fucking numbers and he's a few months away from getting a bag? Like, it's so obvious.
He's going to get the fucking Jerami Grant contract. That 5-year $180 million contract news is going to hit me like a truck, man. Like, I feel so bad for Bulls fans because I can see it coming. I can see just like a glacier, a terrible glacier bearing down on us.
But they're falling for it. They're all on my no. I want to be clear here. The people that are aware that this is happening, like Ricky O'Donnell and Kev, NBA Couchside, are not falling for it. But the large majority of Bull fans are like, in NBA neutral media that are like, can we all agree that the Alex Caruso Josh Giddey trade was fair value now? No, we can't.
No.
We cannot, because this is going to end up being a disaster for the Bulls. It will be a disaster.
Can we agree the OG Anunoby swap was fair value for the Raptors?
It's just ridiculous. Like, it's ridiculous because here's my thing. When it happened, we all called this. You can go back and listen. Yeah. We said this was going to happen a year ago.
God.
And then I also want to just point out here that like we've been wrong about young players before, and like it's possible that Josh Giddey gets better and is not quite as bad as he was his first few years in the NBA. What I can tell you is that he will never return value if he signs a $35 million a year contract this offseason. And I can also tell you that there has never been a player in the modern NBA, last 10 years, that doesn't shoot threes, that doesn't get to the line a ton, and is average around the rim. Like, even if you're like, well, what about like Giannis? Because he doesn't shoot pull-up threes. Okay, Giddey can make the occasional catch and shoot three, sure, when he's wide open in the corner or whatever. Sometimes above the break, blah, blah, blah. There's no like high-level primary creator that is shooting no pull-up threes, never makes pull-up threes. Also is not like Giannis is like such an outlier athletically that it would be ridiculous to compare Josh Giddey to him. Like there's no who is there out there that can.
It's like the Bull Durant comp.
Exactly. It's like there is no world in which Josh Giddey ever leads a top 10 offense for an entire season. And that's what you would have to get to sign him to that deal and feel good about it.
It's really bad. It's very upsetting. Honestly, all in all. All right. Well, assuming that I'll leave that one alone. I did just want to talk about Josh Giddey because he will certainly be on this. Stay tuned. Next year he will be back with a vengeance.
Also,
he's
I want to just
securing a top 3 berth for sure in this exercise next year.
Yes, so. You are absolutely Raven Simone right now, seeing into the future.
Yeah,
but the thing that I just want to say real quickly about Giddey is that whenever we would talk about players that we didn't believe in, that were young players that we thought were overrated by the media, there was always a caveat of, okay, well, if they get better at this one thing, like for example, Cade Cunningham's the example that I always like to use, because I think the argument we always made was he needs to become an elite shooter in order to become, because of the athletic limitations, because of the turnover problems, because of the fact that if he's going to be a lead creator, he needs to improve at all of these other things. Now, it's kind of been the perfect storm for him this year, where the pull-up shooting's been fantastic from 3, fantastic from the mid-range, and that has opened up so much of his game. Also, athletically, I mean, I think that there's a real chance that for those 2 years he was dealing with ankle problems, because if you look at his dunks in this season and just watch the games, like he looks like he has more pep to his step. Like it's very clear that there was some sort of injury hampering his level of athleticism. Now he's still not the most athletic guy in the world, but he's athletic enough if the shooting is very good that will counteract some of the issues that he's had in the past with turnovers and his handle issues and all that stuff for a lead primary creator. Having said that, Josh Giddey, I just don't know in what world can he become that player for in a whole season, not just for fucking March. Like in what world? Like his best case scenario to me is like a much less athletic young Ben Simmons who occasionally hits an open 3. And that's basically what he is right now. Anyway, I'm sorry. Jesus.
Okay. I've got a lot of different directions I can go here. I spent a lot of that time thinking about this. This is really like a game time decision. The clock has ticked down. I don't feel stupendous about this, but I'm just going to take in my gut what I know to be, I think, correct here.
Okay.
Jamal Murray's extension hasn't kicked in yet.
Okay.
Right now, he's making, I believe, $26 million on his contract. That jumps up to 36 next year.
What is it? Read off the figures.
I'm trying to get underneath my thing here to see. So Jamal Murray, not Keegan Murray, not Chris Murray, Jamal Murray. Sorry, it's $36 million this year. It jumps up to $46 million the next year, $50 million the year after that, $53 million the year after that, $57 million the year after that. So just in 28, 29, he's going to be making more money than Anthony Edwards, Tyrese Halliburton, He's making roughly the same amount as Jaylen Brown.
Yeah, because it's a second max.
Yes, because it's the second max, and it's LaMelo Ball making more than Tyrese Maxey, making like substantially more than all these guys. So we're talking about like $11 million more than all of these other guys. Jamal Murray is not like a bad player. The reason I select Jamal Murray here, he disappears and has bad games often enough that I think once he goes to like being a $36 million player, which is like, that was like technically a max, but like in today's NBA, that's like for like a high level starter, which is like about right. He's basically going to get like becoming like a real maximum slot player. And he's always kind of had the cover of being on a team with Michael Porter Jr., who always had the contract that was worse by many people, especially because he has the health luck and stuff like that. Michael Porter Jr.'s contract is like not that bad anymore. Like, it's going to be cheaper than Jamal Murray's. He's still a massive, enormous guy. I know Jamal Murray is like a better player. That contract only has 2 years left. We're talking about a really long contract for a guy that runs parallel to your franchise star. Ultimately like hampering any flexibility or ability you have. And he's like a fine player, but he's like not an all-star. I think he's never made an all-star game.
No,
Is that correct?
He's never made the all-star team.
That's like, because we're getting into like split hairs now. Like we've taken a lot of like the worst contracts in the NBA at this point. That's like alarming. And like, this is a guy who who's had not exactly the cleanest bill of health in his history. This is a guy who's gotten hurt a couple of times. He's not a massive guy. He's not a big defender. He's not this massive plus rotational player. I think that this is like sneaky one of the worst contracts in the NBA.
I don't really think it's even sneaky. I think people have brought this up. I think when he signed the extension, the reaction was, well, Denver kind of had to do it. It was more like they were kind of being held hostage by their situation, right? Like, what are you going to go to Jokic and be like, hey, you know that guy who was the second best player on our team and was like insane in the conference finals and in the finals 2 years ago? We decided to trade him. Like, it was kind of a situation where it was a no-win for them, where unless because I don't think Murray didn't have a ton of value to other teams, is what I'm trying to get at. Like, I don't think there was a team out there that was like lining up to give real value for Jamal Murray, who was about to be up for a contract extension. As you point out, has never made an all-star team, has never made an all-NBA team, was very good in the playoffs, but also had, a down year, actually had a career year last year, but then was bad in the playoffs. You could kind of chalk it up to maybe he's had some injuries. But overall, yeah, I mean, if you're talking about a guy who is going to be on his second max contract and doesn't have the accolades that any of these other guys have, at least in the regular season, because he was amazing in the bubble, he was amazing in the playoffs 2 years ago. Now, my question for you is, I got a lot of shit last year when we did this. I got a lot of shit from people because we took Karl-Anthony Towns and Jaylen Brown in this. And the argument that you could make for Jamal Murray is that he has had runs in the playoffs that vindicate this, even though, like, I mean, I don't think Jaylen Brown's been one of the 30 best players in the NBA this year.
Yeah.
And if that's the case and he makes like $55 to $60 million, then that's what we're judging him based off. We've never said any of these players are bad players. We've said if you're judging them based on what they give you on a year-to-year basis and you're paying them super max money, you're probably going to be a little bit disappointed. Now, Boston probably has the perfect context for that because their team is so fucking stacked. And Jaylen also has proven it at the highest levels now. When we did that podcast, he had not proven it at the highest levels. Jamal Murray's also proven it at the highest level. So that's the hard part for me to kind of figure out here with Jamal Murray.
Yeah. I mean, that's basically like what it's going to be. I mean, the context here, as Will's saying, you're playing with like literally the greatest offensive player of all time next to you. And like the best you can do is be CJ McCollum. Like,
I get it, but also go to Jokic and say that.
Yeah.
Like that's my argument. It's like calculator rats and people who are not in the locker room will tell you, oh, we'll just trade Jamal Murray and just give Jokic anyone and they'll be fine and they'll win. But also like Jokic is like, I've won with this guy before. Like, I don't think Jokic views it the same way as we do, is what I'm trying to say. That's my problem with that argument, is that Jokic has won with him. They're close. He knows they can win. He trusts him. And even if maybe you could win with Tyrese Maxey or someone who's in the same tier as him, not to say that Tyrese Maxey was acquirable, but players that are maybe a little bit better than Jamal, especially as second options and are more consistent, it's hard for me to imagine that you would risk pissing off Jokic. It's the whole thing. Denver shot themselves in the foot because they just made a series of moves where they made a series of bonehead moves where they tried to get too cute with the draft pick stuff, and they relied way too much on drafting, and they weren't good at drafting really. So either way, I mean, look, I get it. I do think I had him on my list. I just think that if we're going based on past history and like what the team's situation was, it's hard for me to believe that you would just get rid of a player like that. And like you kind of had your hands tied.
Yeah. I think also just the injury stuff can't be like overstated too. Like that, he's also a guy who's like missed seasons, and it's like really fucked up like huge portions of, Nicola's, prime here. Now, given, are you going to blame a guy for tearing?
I was going to say, I dropped like because that was. Did you see people with the Kyrie argument where they were talking about like his like? Well, basically, what people were arguing was like, well, of course, Kyrie tore his ACL. He's been playing so many minutes, and blah blah. And I'm like, ACLs are a little bit random. Like, you could literally sit out a full season and then come back and tear your ACL in the first game. Like, I'm not going to hand it to ISIS, Nico Harrison, and say it was a good thing that he traded away Luka Doncic and made Kyrie play more minutes at his age and stuff. That it proves, if anything, his plan was stupid because you can't expect guys in their 30s to stay healthy. But also at the same time, ACLs, especially the Jamal Murray one, I remember a few years ago, it was just like a random freak accident play. The thing that I would say to that is like, now he's stacked up a few different injuries, and at times he looks a step slow. And you go, okay, well, if he looks a step slow and he's a guy who was already not a crazy athlete, like Jamal was a lot of his game was dependent on tough shot making, was dependent on craft. And when you lose a little bit of a step and you're already not an elite athlete, it can hurt you for sure. So I don't know. We'll see. But if anyone has a chance to graduate from this, I guess I would probably put him on the list, just because if he has another really good playoff run, then everyone won't give a shit how much money he makes. No, just like with Jaylen Brown. Like, I don't care.
Say Jaylen Brown and Cat are good examples. Yeah. He's very much in that tier where like right now it looks pretty dicey, but who knows? Maybe the context changes or they win the title or something, and it's like not as big of a deal. Yeah. I am skeptical. I think there's a lot of, combined with the injury things, how he projects to not really age that well, I'm skeptical, I guess is what I'm going to say.
There's definitely downside. Okay. So do we want to do a depressing one, or do we want to do, let's do a depressing one.
Okay.
Now, I hope that this isn't the case, and I hope this player can get healthy. But Kawhi Leonard makes the same amount of money as Paul George, and I don't think that there's really an argument that he's been all that much better than him this season. Now, I know he just had a game-winning shot the other night, but at times, man, it looks tough with Kawhi, where it's just... Now, Kawhi stamped forever, and Kawhi gets a lot of benefit of the doubt for good reason. He's been the best player on a championship team.
Twice.
Arguable on the first one, but the second one, it was undeniable. But
second one was almost the biggest carry job we've ever seen, like besides LeBron.
He got them to the doorstep at a minimum.
Yeah.
And so Kawhi gets a lot of benefit of the doubt because of that, and also just because it's kind of another thing where it's like, it's kind of similar. We compared to him to like Embiid and Bill Walton and guys like that, where it's just more of a sad story about the injuries piling up and his body not being quite the same, and it's not something that he can really help.
Yeah.
But someone asked me this in the Discord the other day, and they said, why has KD... So we talk about the cool zone a lot. So for anyone who's unfamiliar with the concept, the cool zone is basically like you're like the 8th to 20th best player in the league. Sometimes we could, since there's a lot of talent, we could stretch up to like 25 or 30, where the expectations for you aren't as high as they are for, you know,
Jason Tatum,
for the top 5 to 7 players in the NBA who have all the pressure and expectations. They win MVPs or they're expected to carry their teams to championships and all of that. So the players that we use in the past are like Anthony Davis, Damian Lillard.
This
Jimmy
is
Butler.
This is SGA's last year in the cool zone. He's graduating out of the cool zone.
I think
year.
he's too good now. I think
he's too good,
but
the media hasn't caught up. They're still treating him like he's a. Once he wins MVP, it's over. It's going to be over this.
Well, he's very clearly one of the 5 best players in the NBA.
No, I'm not. No, he's like a top 3 player in the NBA. But I'm just saying, like, the way he is narratively spoken about, he is still in the cool zone. But that is going to end after this year.
Jalen Brunson's another guy who's in the cool zone that we've talked about before. But historically, Kawhi is in the cool zone, is what someone said. And like, they were basically saying, like, how come KD gets so much shit all the time from every angle and Kawhi doesn't? And I think the answer is truly that Toronto Raptors season.
Yeah.
It's not to say that KD wasn't amazing at times in the playoffs and did carrying in his own right, but also everyone will only remember him joining a super team at the peak of their powers and becoming unbeatable. And
he's also packed up and left like winning situations like 3 times now.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like, I get that he's like a huge part of that, but it's not like it was like the fucking, you know, it's not like these teams weren't even like the Jokic when they were like an 8 seed. You know what I'm saying? This is all of his teams have been like top 4 in their conference, like in the mix.
Yeah.
He's always had like co-star. He's never had a situation like LeBron in Cleveland, like at any point in time.
No, OKC. Yeah, he always had at least one other like all NBA level teammate.
Yeah.
And he jumped.
Usually 2.
He was fairly unhappy in all of those situations for different reasons.
Yeah.
Winning did not cure it all for him in those situations. Kawhi did obviously have that happen once with the Spurs, although that did seem like it was a little bit more complicated because of the medical stuff. And then also the Raptors, he never wanted to be there in the first place. So people kind of gave him the pass. He wins the championship. He leaves after 1 season. Now, the situation that he's in now, he makes $50 million this year. He makes $50 million the next 2 years. And just from a pure availability standpoint, this is the, 2nd, 3rd straight season that he's missed a ton of time to start the year. He's played in 22 games this year. He's played 29 minutes per game. He's averaged 18 points, 5 rebounds, 2.8 assists, which is all the lowest since 2014, 2015 for him. So this is very obviously the worst Kawhi that we've seen since he became Kawhi. And that is alarming when you consider the fact that he's now 33 years old and also is someone who is just not, you don't know if he's going to be available in the regular season. You don't know if he's going to be available in the playoffs. You're paying a guy that is a maybe on any given night. And he's someone that you very obviously just cannot rely on. So I think if you're making $50 million per year, and that is the case, once again, more of a sad story than anything else. It really does suck that. But I will say, at least he's playing games again. Because when he got shut down at the Olympics, I thought that was it. I thought it was like, oh, Kawhi's done. Like, we'll never see Kawhi play again.
Yeah.
And he at least can sometimes still have it on a given night when the shot is falling, but he just does not look the same. And I think that the knee stuff has just caught up with him, unfortunately. So, all right. So, next one for you.
Will keeps begging me to take someone in the comments, but I don't think we're there yet. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to stay on last name, and I'm going to select a guard named Murray again for the second pick in a row. Let's bring Dejounte Murray into the context. And let's talk about how the Atlanta Hawks won their trade when they traded him and still are going to end up massively in the negative. Just in terms of like acquiring him and like sending him like back out the door. I think Dejounte Murray is like, he's like the Charizard. Like we just talked about the Emmanuel Quickley, like what happened with Emmanuel Quickley and how that's like a that's like the Charmander version. And this is the Charizard version of that exact same situation where it's like the exact same thing, but like everyone's like a step higher. So like Dejounte Murray is like an acceptable starter who's like probably should be like the fifth or fourth best player on like a really good team and has been like recast as like the second best player on like a championship team and is like paid and is respected like that for some reason. He's got a defense that is been mostly hypothetical for like a year and a half now. Again, I don't want to beat up on a guy too much for getting injured, but he did just miss a ton of games this year with, again, it was kind of a freak injury, but like.
And also it was the first real injury he's had in his career. He's been one of the most available players.
Didn't he tear his ACL?
Oh, he did when he was young. You're right.
Yeah.
Since he became like the Dejounte that I know Dejounte as, he's been like an Iron Man. Like he's barely missed ever any time after that torn ACL. I think he was a rookie when he did that.
Yep. Did make an all-star team, as Brian points out. Was he a backfill selection? I think he was, right, with the Spurs. Yeah,
that was kind of a fake all-star team.
That was a huge Mickey Mouse
all-star
team.
That was the last true pump and dump situation we've had in the NBA, where they just gassed up his stats and made it look like he was like this like triple-double Russ Jokic prime Ben Simmons level player, and he was
that after D'Angelo Russell? I guess it must have been, yeah, with the Nets.
Yeah, it was literally just before he got traded to the Hawks. It was the last season with the Spurs. It was very obvious that the Spurs did not have many other good players, and they were just letting him cook. Yeah, and it was very obviously fake at the time.
So let me read off Dejounte Murray's contract for those of you who are unfamiliar with this. He's making $29 million this year, $31 million next year, $33 million next year, and then $31 million again the year after. So basically about in line with that terrible Emmanuel Quickley contract I took up, 1 year shorter, and for a player who's at least a starter, you know, and I guess has at least made an all-star team, even if it was like a fake one. This is a guy who's getting paid like he's the third best player on a championship team, and he should more kind of be like the fourth or fifth. And I think that it's,
but he was propositioned by Ball Don't Stop holding two pills in his hand. And he said, you can have a Danny Green style career where you are a beloved role player. You can take this pill, or you can take this other pill where you put up empty stats. You're a hooper, and you are the king of the play-in. And Dejounte said, "Run me that." And took that pill, and he overdosed on it.
He took the red pill. So yeah, I think it's really tough that he ended up on the Pelicans. I don't really know what the Pelicans were thinking, kind of going for him. It's just such a bad fit. Like with
fun preview for our New Orleans live show when we do the David Griffin slop trial.
Yeah, we're gonna have to take a look at that and see what's going on with some of these things. It's really not as bad of a contract as some of these other ones, but I do think that this contract is a little bit immovable now because he hasn't really been good for a couple of like not very good teams, and I still do think he kind of sees himself as, it's kind of like the DeMar DeRozan thing, but like he's worse than DeMar DeRozan, like where you can't really have him on a good team because he's like going to want to cook and like try to be good, like in that context. And he's like not that guy. So he's still kind of clinging to that like all-star, you know, pedigree that he has. So I think this is like, again, a little bit sneaky. One of that, even though it's like not that like expensive a contract, like 30 million isn't really that bad. It is 3 more years after this, and it is kind of brutal. Like you're not going to get that kind of like.
Yeah, I can't imagine talking myself into a player like Dejounte Murray. I mean, you got to be so delusional and so just absolutely out of your mind to ever. Someone commented and said one Brandon Ingram to another. They got, it literally just reminds me of when Kanye started dating that woman after he got divorced from Kim, and she literally just looks like a Kim Kardashian, like someone created like a variant of Kim Kardashian, and he's like, oh, here's Kim Kardashian again. It's literally David Griffin cannot stop. He cannot stop going back for more Brandon Ingram.
I'd like to point out that you also talked yourself into Brandon Ingram last year.
I'm aware. I know. Yeah. I mean, that's how the cap space plan gap year drove me so insane that I talked myself into 2 players that I've always thought sucked. That's not to be fair. When Brandon Ingram was young, I didn't think he sucked, but I was like the anti Dejounte guy. I remember losing my mind when people wanted us to trade Ben Simmons for him.
Yeah.
And now, in retrospect, it would.
As KJ points out, I mean, hey, he would have been better than Paul George.
Brandon Ingram?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, but the problem with Brandon Ingram is what he
might have been worse for this year, though. You guys would probably be like
a little bit better, and then he got hurt now. I think that unless he has the worst ankle sprain in the history of the NBA, I think it's fair to say that the Raptors are just holding him out.
Yeah.
Because he sprained his ankle and now he's been out for like 2 months. Like the only problem with Brandon Ingram is that he's literally never available. There are many problems with Brandon Ingram in general, but he only played 18 games this year, Brandon Ingram. Did you realize that?
I didn't realize that. I thought it was like 40.
So did I. I didn't even, because we stopped paying attention to the Pelicans.
Yeah.
Because anyway, come see us.
It bums us out.
Yeah. Sixers,
I want the Pelicans to be good so bad, man. Like they kind of are my like West Coast team. Like they're like my Western Conference team that I was
gonna say your Western Conference team. You should probably specify that because they're literally.
No, I already have an Eastern Conference team.
No, I just meant because it's very funny
the Washington Wizards.
I'm saying it's very funny that you would ever refer to New Orleans as West Coast.
Oh, I see.
Western League. It's like
I guess Western Conference. Yeah,
like you could drive to Georgia, which is like, is it Georgia on the coast?
Yeah,
you could probably drive there in like 3 hours.
Yeah,
not to the coast of Georgia, but to the state of Georgia.
Like I think it's like literally further east than like Milwaukee. Like,
yeah, it's really not west at all. I mean, they have to, when they do conference realignment, they should seriously consider moving New Orleans to the east. Because it just makes also just for their fans so that they can maybe win a playoff series sometime. Because in the West, that's going to be tough. But they're going to get another shot. Like they'll probably get a top 4 pick in this draft. Like, well, do you fire David Griffin so he can't make the pick before that? He hasn't been horrible at drafting. I mean, he did get them Trey Murphy. Well, once again, we'll save it for slop trial. But he did get them Trey Murphy and Herb Jones in that one draft. Okay, so. Next pick, it's a doozy. All right, I'll just have people yell at me. I'm going to take Jaylen Green. Jaylen Green contract has not started yet. Now, of everyone here, I guess Jaylen Green could probably make this look the worst if he ever does figure out how to shoot. But we're going on 4 years of him not being able to shoot, right? Like, that's the thing that shocks me the most about Jaylen Green and the Rockets in general is that, like, you look at the stats and you watch the games and you go, how is this team good? like once again, I like a lot of their role players, but you have an offense that is running through Şengün, who's having a down year scoring and efficiency wise. Jaylen Green, who takes the most jumpers I've ever seen for a bad shooter ever, maybe. Like, is there any player because normally when a guy can't shoot, he's not allowed to take that many shots.
But that's the Rockets are so shooting starved that like he's like empowered, and it really is kind of like a codependent relationship.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Oh, what's up, Dewey?
Hi, Dewey. How you doing?
We got Dewey in the tree. If you're listening on audio, Dewey has just entered the podcast.
Dewey has decided he's going to come and defend Jalen Green. What's funny is that Jalen Green is actually having the best shooting season of his career from three. He's shooting 35% from three. And I didn't even mean to say that like a joke. I'm serious. He's never shot above 34%. This is the first year he's ever done it. And he is someone who inside the arc, he's shooting 48% from two. A lot of that is just due to the fact that he takes a lot of mid-range shots and bad shots for a guy who's not particularly good at them. And I guess my thing with Jalen Green is like, I've just been waiting for him to become anything more than, an inefficient bucket getter who occasionally has loud random outbursts when the shot is falling. And he could make incremental improvements and not be like a disaster on this, but I just don't know how you can really justify giving him that money. And I was confused as hell at the time when the contract was handed out, because I thought that this was a bad contract in two different ways. It was a bad contract when they handed it out. When we did the stream for the rookie extensions, I was confused by it mainly due to the fact that he wasn't particularly good and he got over $30 million per year for the next few years. And the other part was that he signed a contract that was short term. So even if Jalen Green became the player that the biggest Jalen Green stan in the world thinks he can be, he was immediately going to get more money 2 years from now. That made it so that this contract wasn't really that good value for a long time for the team, for team building purposes. Because right now he is on he's still on his rookie contract, but next year he makes 33. The year after that he makes 36, and the following year he makes 36 with a player option on the last year. If you want to drop the line, you can.
Yeah, I think he's going to be picking that one up.
So we now have over $100 million for a player that is fine. He's a fine player. He's okay. He's an okay player, and he's making over $100 million over the next 3 years. I just don't really know it's very rare that we see players that underperform like this on their rookie deals ever get these second contracts.
Being the number 2 pick's a hell of a drug, man. Like, Wiseman got more contract. Wiseman was actively the worst player in the NBA every single year he was in the NBA, and still got some sort of contract. I think there's part of this is anchoring for
but he's on a vet minimum now, and he was drafted the year after. Wiseman got a veteran's minimum contract.
Well,
They traded him. Yeah. You're thinking of Bagley.
I'm thinking of Bagley. Yes.
Yeah, Bagley got the $12 million a year extension. But even then, I guess this, when we talk about who are you bidding against? And they did draft him, and maybe they saw internal improvements they thought that was going to translate to this season, but clearly hasn't really in a meaningful way. I guess my question with this is it's not that you were bidding against anyone. It's that why were you so we need to do this extension now instead of just waiting until the offseason? Just to see because if he hit free agency this upcoming offseason and they let him go find an offer, what do you think the biggest offer? I think it would be the Zach LaVine deal from when he signed the offer sheet with the Kings and then the Bulls just matched it. And that at the time was $19 million a year. So yeah, maybe Jalen Green goes and gets $27 million a year and you match it if you're the Rockets. But I don't think anyone was offering him $36 million a year. No, there's no chance.
No.
Yeah. So
they should have just dared him to.
Yeah. Once again, I think they wanted to have a contract that they thought they could trade for a star. Yeah. This upcoming offseason. And they figured they would have to choose between Şengün and Jalen Green. But now, I don't know.
Do you want to pay Şengün?
That's the other thing is Şengün has had a very disappointing season, and he makes a lot more than Jalen Green, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
But also Şengün has been like better in the past. I don't know. It's hard for me to say. Like, I guess because Amen Thompson popped off this year, they can afford to be patient. You know what I mean? And that was the thing that I've always said with Houston is like, I understand. I would, if anything, I would have not given Jalen Green this contract because I would want to be patient. Like, I would want to be like, all right, we can try to go get like a huge star if Giannis asks out or someone like that. And then maybe you have to settle for a Devin Booker or whatever, like a B tier, or not even B tier, like a B plus tier star instead of like an A plus tier star. But yeah, that's kind of it. Is there any team in the West you think Houston can beat in the playoffs?
I think if somehow they ended up playing the Grizzlies, I think that would be kind of an interesting rock fight series that could kind of go either way.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think that's a 4-5 right now, actually.
Yeah,
if I remember correctly. So
I think some of those teams, I think the Grizzlies have a little more variance than people are giving them credit for. I don't think they're as dead on arrival as like Houston is, for example, but like I think they absolutely could lose to Houston though too. I think they could lose to any team as well.
I think that the teams that everyone thinks are going to be better in the playoffs in the West towards the top of the conference, and then teams like the Warriors are probably begging for one of those two teams in the first round.
Probably, yeah.
Just because the rest of the field is so strong in comparison. Yeah, so
for sure.
All right,
unless the Kings make it in.
Yeah, we'll see. I'm not super sure that the Kings are gonna end up making it, but all right. So we'll do two more. We just did 10, but the first three are so obvious that I feel like we have to throw a bone here a little bit.
I'll get Will off my back. Let's just take Patrick Williams here.
Patrick Williams is a player that when he signed, all right, I keep getting mad at myself because I did this with Dejounte Murray too, where I was like, I don't understand the appeal of this player. And then they signed a contract and I go, well, that's not that much money. That's fine.
Yeah.
Patrick Williams making $18 million a year is fine. But the thing that I should have trusted my gut on was the fact that, like, I genuinely don't think Patrick Williams really cares about basketball.
Yeah, no.
It's not to say that he, like, is... I don't think he's as horrible as his numbers are this year, but it doesn't feel like he's one of those guys. It seems like he's just one of those guys that got paid and is like, cool, I got paid.
Yeah, the DeAndre Ayton award.
Yeah, sick. Awesome. I got that second which, hey, that's better than the large majority of professional athletes. Most people don't even get a second contract.
He's making more money than like a all-pro offensive tackle is like going to make in their entire career.
Yeah. Offensive guard. A tackle would make like over 20 million a year, but guard. There are guards that make less than Patrick Williams makes, and Patrick Williams, once again, when he signed that contract, I think it was 5 years, 80 million, if I remember correctly.
Yeah,
5 years, 80 million. So it's like 18 million per year every year, I believe.
Yeah, 90 million, I think.
90 million. Okay, 90 million. So it's 18 million per year. And he signed it, and I was like, yeah, that's fine. Like, I wouldn't have paid him it, but also like, he's a wing. He's got size. He can shoot and make open threes. Defensively, he's got some flashes. But I didn't factor in the fact that, like, the second he got paid, he was just like, I'm good. I'm chilling. Like, honestly, I respect him for that.
Well, the reason he's like down here, because it is a 5-year contract. The reason he's down here is and not like near the top of this, because like you said, it's like really not that much money. Like, it's like double the mid-level exception. I think it's still under average starter money, like in the NBA. Like, it's like really not that much. And again, he does play like a position of need. This is a guy who's a career 39% 3-point shooter. So like, it's like almost like if you're like just looking at that, you're like, okay, well, he would have to like negative improve for this to be a bad contract.
And he immediately did.
But like you said, he did immediately negative improve, where it's like he might have just been holding out for like that money. And I do kind of feel like it is absolutely possible that he just continues to suck and get worse throughout the rest of this contract. And it is just kind of low level bad. Because the thing is, the reality of the NBA is guys over the course of contracts will have good seasons and bad seasons. So
Right.
this list will like fluctuate a lot. What is like bad is when there's guys like Tobias Harris or Patrick Williams or something who are just flatly like normal.
I was going to say, I can't think of a less consequential player than Patrick Williams. Like,
yeah.
I'm the 6th best player on the 10 seed in the Eastern Conference. I'm no one really ever follows or cares about the Bulls that much to really have like an informed opinion on him. I remember years ago, like losing my mind when people were like, I'd rather have Patrick Williams than Maxey. But then that argument became so obsolete so fast when it was obvious who they were as players that I was just kind of like, oh yeah, Patrick Williams is still kind of just around. Like, do you remember years ago when The Ringer had that podcast, Music Exists? With Chuck Klosterman and Chris Ryan?
I remember friend of the podcast, Kill a Cow, asked the Ricky to ask him if music exists, and he got mad about it. Awesome.
Klosterman said, the podcast isn't called Does Music Exist? But music exists. What kind of question is that? All-time classic moment.
God, he's so Gen X, dude.
Yeah.
Klosterman is like the fucking definition of it. Between him and Simmons, they really are the yin and yang of like Gen X.
Russillo's in there too.
Oh yeah, Russillo. Yeah, they are a little triumvirate of like.
Yeah. Because Russillo and Klosterman both do the same thing, where instead of giving like their strong opinions on things, they just lay out the case for both sides and then never give like a strong opinion on it. Where it's like they're kind of just laying out the details as opposed to being like, here's how I feel about it.
Right.
And then you're like, well, you could go either way, you know?
Yeah.
Kind of like I just did with the Jamal Murray thing.
Right.
But once again, Patrick Williams exists. Feels like an appropriate way to describe him. He's just there. He's just around. And the thing, the comp that I want to make for him, and this might be a little bit unfair to Patrick Williams because maybe he bounces back and it has a normal year next year, and it doesn't. You know how for years we were obsessed with shooters, and it led to Davis Bertans getting like a 5-year, $80 million contract.
Yeah.
That's kind of what the wing athlete wing equivalent is of this, where everyone is just always searching for the next Aaron Gordon, Andrew Wiggins, Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown, like wing who can play in the playoffs. That it got Patrick Williams drafted with the 4th pick in the draft, and now has made him over $100 million in the NBA. Like well over $100 million, despite never being better than like the 5th best player on the court at all times.
It's amazing.
I remember someone had a stat about him. It's probably wrong now because I'm sure he's had random games, but I think at this point last year, he had like 4 20-point games in his entire career.
Oh my God. Is that true?
I honestly don't even know. And one of them was in the playoffs. It was just a random hot shooting game he had against the Bucks in that series. I think that was his rookie season, if I remember correctly. He leads the league in missed dunks this year as well, Patrick Williams. Patrick Williams is the only time I ever hear about him is when he horribly missed a dunk. Like he just flies through the lane and completely whiffs it. All right, I'm going to look this up. I'm going to look up Patrick Williams' career high. And I'm fairly certain. So he had a game where he had 35, but it was
he has 5 playoff games. 2 of them are 20-point games. So
that's amazing because in the regular season he's only had 20 points 10 times, 20 points or more 10 times in 5 NBA seasons.
He did it twice against the Bucks in that series.
So wing Jamal Murray, someone said he's a riser. So he had and also he's only had 25 or more twice in his career, Sam. And one of those was literally the last game of the season when Minnesota benched all their starters. So he's literally only had 25 points in one real NBA game. Which is amazing for a guy that was drafted to like potentially be like a wing scorer. He's kind of the Kawhi Leonard of Tony Snell's.
Oh no. He is kind of the inheritor of the Tony Snell's like thing, but like,
well, it's really Cody Williams.
I don't think Tony Snell was in the NBA for like 12 years.
I was going to say, and Cody Williams also, I was going to say, because Tony Snell had multiple seasons where he shot over 40% from three. So it's probably really Patrick Williams.
It's really Patrick Williams. Cody is just going to be out of the NBA.
Yeah. So I was going to say something about wings with the last name Williams and disappearing all the time is a big thing.
Cody Williams is the James Young of Romeo Langford's.
Yeah, perfect.
Yeah,
thank you for bringing. Wow, that was the first time you referenced Romeo Langford in so long. I just got a flashback to 2022.
He's coming back.
Romeo Langford comeback season during Mickey Mouse March.
Yeah, I'm shocked. Well, I'll let you make your last pick because I think there's a chance we go through without picking one player.
Okay, so I'm gonna do a little honorary Hall of Fame bad contracts guys who have graduated from previous bad contract drafts. Ben Simmons was bought out of his contract recently. Pour one out for Ben Simmons' contract.
It's been a long day. Ben Simmons, my friend. Tell you all about it.
Do you think he retires after the season? He'll get another. I think he'll get another veterans minimum.
Oh, is it worth the veterans minimum? Worth it for him to play? He might just be more valuable to him to just go be like handsome and cool somewhere.
Just get really good at video games again.
Yeah, that's what I would do. Fuck.
He's out again. I'm assuming he played 5 games for the Clippers. He averaged 6 points, 5 rebounds, 5 assists. I'm just looking at his stats. I have not checked in on Ben Simmons in quite some time.
And how many minutes was that? With those stats,
21 minutes a game.
Okay, that's not great. I was gonna say if that was like 15 minutes, that's actually like not bad.
Shot 58% from the field and 85% from the line.
Okay. Wait, is Ben back? Ben might be back.
Ben's back, baby.
Ben's back.
Yeah, hopefully Ben's back's okay. And then the other guys that have expired from this, honestly, someone who just beat the allegations, DeAndre Hunter.
Yeah,
I think he's a fair value contract now.
No, and I hated him. Yeah,
big wing who can shoot. He's on a good team. He's fit well so far there. We'll see what he looks like in the playoffs, but that's a fine contract for him now. Another player that I don't know if he beat the allegations, but the contract is almost over and he's gotten better is RJ Barrett, who I would always have taken on these. Like every year I was like RJ Barrett.
Yeah. No, he's at least got himself out of, like, I think if we went like another like 5 rounds, he would have got drafted, but like I think he's out of here. So.
I think that he's been good enough that him making like $24 million a year is not that big a deal or whatever he makes.
Yeah.
Jordan Poole.
So that was the one I was referencing there. I was like, I would have been shocked if we got through this exercise without drafting Jordan Poole, but I think he's barely graduated.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of by default because there's just been so many bad ones.
Yeah. But he was like the worst contract in the NBA. Or like was like a automatic top 3, and I think he's like maneuvered his way.
He was on the graphic last year.
Yeah.
He was on the graphic for the bad contract draft. And I think he's probably like an $18 million a year player making $30 million, which not good, but not like the worst you've ever seen. Okay. So here I'm going to run down a few people that we did not draft that need to get honorable mentions. Okay, ready?
Okay.
Brandon Ingram, Drew Holiday, your guy. Bam Adebayo, who I'm shocked you did not draft.
He's still like a defensive player. Like when the rubber meets the road. Like it's fun to say that, but like
Bam's a very good player. I just think that him making like basically almost supermax money is insane.
I wanted to like trust me, the will was there, but I couldn't.
In my heart of hearts, I would have selected him in the bad.
I would have. If he played for the Thunder, I absolutely would have.
Yeah. So okay. Terrence Mann, who signed a contract and then they traded him 4 months later. Very weird that he took that he got that extension in the first place. Yusuf Nurkic, who makes like $19 million a year and is just fully washed.
That's only like 1 year left after this year, right?
Yeah, that's why I didn't take it.
Yeah.
Another one where it's similar, Kevin Huerter, Zach Collins, both. I know Zach Collins is playing well right now. I'm sorry, I do not believe it. Both of them are locked up next year. The Bulls have 3 of these worst contracts. Honorable mention, but didn't feel strong about it. Klay Thompson, just because they got rid of Luka. Why are you paying Klay Thompson $17 million a year if you don't have Luka anymore? Grayson Allen, who we've discussed, had a crazy shooting year. And someone pointed out that the Duncan Robinson contract actually wasn't that bad because he had the crazy run a few years ago where they made the finals and he shot like 70% from 3 against the Bucks. Grayson Allen is very obviously not going to have that style run. And I also think Duncan Robinson had one of the greatest shooting seasons of all time.
Yes.
During his contract, if I remember correctly. So you at least have to hand those 2 things to him.
Yeah. If you're a white guy and you want to get paid, you just have like a crazy outlier shooting season and everyone will take it at face value and pay you.
Exactly. Yeah. Sam Hauser's kicking himself for signing that contract.
Yeah. That
was Jordan Clarkson, who is just only has a year left, but Jordan Clarkson is just not that guy. Josh Green, who at the time I understood it, but then he got salary dumped and he's just whatever and makes like $15 million a year, $14 million a year. Wendell Carter Jr., I thought about it, but he's fine and he doesn't make that much.
Yeah.
And then the last one that I'm not going to select, mostly just to protect your heart, is Robert Williams, who has probably left. He's also played, I think, literally the least amount of any player that we talked about on this contract today. He's played 26 games, I think, on this contract. Like it has not returned its value in any capacity. So, but yeah, he only has 1 year left. It's expiring after this year. So, also someone I totally forgot that's also on the Blazers, Matisse Thybulle, who has not played a game this year, was hurt and then sprained his ankle when he was warming up and still has not played. It's amazing that he just exists and is another guy that is just like, I forget he's in the NBA. That's why I didn't even write him down.
I kind of took a look at Simons.
He only has 1 year left on his deal, though. That's the problem, is that like a lot of these guys. But I have to, with the last pick, I think I got to take Kentavious Caldwell-Pope. I mean, he's been really bad for the Magic this year. He started to look like he was declining last year in the playoffs. Now, look, I still thought Denver was being cheap when they let him walk, and I didn't agree with the decision. But then I thought people went a little bit too far with it, where it's like, okay, Kentavious Caldwell-Pope's good, but he's also like 31 now and was playing off of 2 of the greatest players of all time in LeBron James and Nikola Jokic in his last like few runs in the playoffs. Like, once again, very good fifth player for 2 championship level teams, had a really good career, but he's making like $22-23 million a year. And he doesn't even he's not shooting well. He's not quite as engaged on defense. And the offense was always a little bit overrated if you were expecting him to do anything other than just like make the right play and make open shots. So KCP's got to be the last guy that's included on here because he literally just started his deal. Anyone else that you think could make this list next year? I know you already took Josh Giddey.
Josh Giddey. I took a hard look at Miles Bridges, who's like
having the fakest Mickey Mouse march of all time.
Yeah, I was gonna say he's like has numbers there, like on top of being an awful guy, as we obligatorily mention every time. But like they're paying him quite a bit of money, and I think that his context is like. I think if the Charlotte Hornets like get Cooper Flagg, or if it's like something happens with them to like make them relevant, I think that that's going to come into focus a little bit more, and people are going to be like, so why do they pay Miles
$25 million a year?
$25 million a year for the next 3 years? Like, why is that what's happening? So that was one I like kind of looked at. I looked at as Will has brought up, some of the high pick rookies from this last draft.
I had a thought. I had that thought too because I saw how much Ricochet makes.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh my God, the first pick makes like $15 million a year now.
Yeah. So it's like Ricochet and Sar are like quite a bit. As Will pointed out, Dejounte Saloon, who's like maybe the worst player in the NBA, is making like $7 million. He's making more money than Peyton Pritchard.
That's amazing.
Like over the next like, 2 years. So
that's special. I didn't even think of that.
Yeah.
Another guy that we'll see after the playoffs because I think he's been better than expected, even though his offensive numbers suck for the Bucks. But Kyle Kuzma is someone just to keep on the radar for next year.
Yeah.
I think we've taken him in the past.
I definitely would have taken him if he didn't get traded. Like the Wizards, Kyle Kuzma was
so bad.
A bucket this year and a problem.
Yeah. All right. So yeah, we'll see. We'll be back with the best value contracts on the Patreon later this week. Sign up for that if you have not already, and we'll talk about the players who are getting scammed, which is always so positive and fun to talk about.
Yes. I also forgot I set up for a fun, and then my computer broke and I was late, but I set up for like a fun joke about being sponsored by Polar, and then I ruined the visual.
I was gonna say, are you just stunting, showing off your stash there?
This is my spread. If you want to try and go band for band with me on Seltzer, come through.
Let's go. Oh, we did miss. They allowed GMs to be drafted in Bill and House's draft this year, and the in-house took Nico Harrison.
Oh, I don't even know the contract. I mean,
no, they don't know. They don't know the contract. They don't know how much money they make because it's usually not public. But like, if we were able to do that, I think Masai. Maury makes like, I know for a fact Maury makes like $10 million a year.
That's crazy.
So if Maury makes $10 million a year, Maury, Masai, Ainge, Nico Harrison, obviously.
Masai and Danny are the same because they both have like equity. Like they both were like given the farm to like be over there. Like,
which is so funny because if we had literally just listed the best GMs in the NBA 5 years ago, 3 of the 4 I just named would have been on there.
It moves fast, man. You gotta stay on your toes.
Adapt or die, baby. Adapt or die.
You gotta stay. You gotta stay positive.
Yeah, exactly. All right. Thanks for joining, guys. Talk to you later. Peace.